Good morning, everybody. Going to give it just another couple of seconds here as people are joining us this morning. Again, my name is Mark Waltzell. I'm the statewide salmon and steelhead manager for the department. With me on the call this morning is Dr. Derek Dapp from our modeling unit and Dr. Kirsten Simonson, our lead recreational biologist for Puget Sound. We are I think it's day 4 of PFMC. We were able to center in on a singular ocean option that met the LCN rates yesterday. I'm gonna have Derek walk through that in a little bit. Had a number of co-manager discussions yesterday. Once the modeling was done, we were finally able to get together late in the afternoon, evening. We presented proposals for sport fishery changes for modeling. And we went through those last night as kind of a side model. So we'll be able to walk through some of those changes too with you this morning. We have another gathering with our co-managers this morning at 9 to go over the modeling results from last night and talk about further fishery shaping that's likely to happen with our co-managers. And then we'll see where that modeling gets us for, hopefully, we'll be at final action at the end of the day tomorrow. So with that, I may just pause for a second and allow Derek to walk us through some of the modeling changes that happened to get us to the LCN tooling number. And then we'll go from there and take questions. Derek.
Thank you, Mark. And as we're getting started up, I do see that Shannon has his hand raised. Shannon, do you have a question before we get started with modeling?
Shannon.
Okay, so the problem here is I've got it clicked on lower hand, but it's must be reverse on your end, eh?
Yeah, so your hand's up on our end. I'll lower it for you.
Yeah, because I've got it clicked lower hand, so I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. So on my end, raise hand is lower hand. How's that? Okay, thanks.
All right, so as Mark mentioned, we had a set of STT model runs yesterday that focused in on a singular ocean option. We had a number of changes that went into this set of model runs. We had looked at a reduction of the non-treaty quota from 60,000 to 54,000, as well as kind of some small shifts to the season timings there. We had a change to our Willapa fisheries. We'd updated those to represent 2022. We had some changes that we saw in south of Falcon Troll, as well as kind of some changes to the in-river LCN harvest rate. So that kind of set of runs didn't make a huge difference for most of our Puget Sound stocks, although you can see the results on screen now if you're interested in a particular stock or how that might have shook out at the end of those ocean option changes. Kind of the important piece to notice here is we are now meeting our lower Columbia natural Thule ER. We're at 38.0%. As folks know, that's kind of one of the big stocks we've been paying attention to in the ocean. I might pause there, see if there's any questions about kind of that set of ocean option runs.
And it looks like Pat has his hand up. Pat?
Thank you. Good morning, you all. Derek, looking at the Stillaguamish, the unmarked and marked, it isn't very valuable to us to see the total, the Southern U.S. totals. Could you break that down for us? What's the non-treaty and unmarked and marked exploitation rates?
So Pat, this one doesn't have any changes at the moment to Puget Sound fisheries. Any of the proposals that we've been looking at right now, kind of some of the targets that I've recently been looking at for Stillaguamish in the range of 63 to 66 each is still accurate. I would say that there are still some very large treaty inputs in here that would cause them to, that kind of causes those numbers to shoot up. In terms of what we're looking at for total mortalities, we have currently the set of model runs is 75 for the non-treaty, and for the treaty, once again recognizing that there's the treaty troll in there, 8,500, and kind of a few other pieces. We do see about 121 total mortalities for the tribes.
So Derek, yeah, I don't want to get too tangled up into model details here, but so this right now, that run that you just showed us has it for the non-treaty fisheries in Puget Sound, it's about the same as model run 2022.
That's correct. This one didn't. This one included very minor Puget Sound changes. I believe the only changes that we had for Puget Sound in the set of model runs was for Bellingham Bay fisheries.
And so that means that it doesn't reflect what the proposal that WDFW gave the tribes. It does not reflect that yet, right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Pat. And our next hand is from Glenn. Glenn, you can unmute yourself.
Morning, Derek. I think you just answered my questions. Basically, it was I wanted to see if the numbers for Chinook coming into Puget Sound changed at all. You know, we're concerned about Area 5, those numbers being lower when the other areas went up with numbers. And I just want to see if that's going to fluctuate at all.
Do you mean, so Glenn, just to confirm and make sure I understand the question, you mean the number of Stillaguamish mortalities fluctuating at all in kind of between the sets of model runs?
No, more overall. You know, how our numbers went down a few hundred fish to where the other numbers in other areas actually went up. And I want to see if there's going to be any more fluctuation in that at all.
I think I do expect some quotas to change in upcoming fisheries packages. That's kind of consistent with some of the documents that we walked through yesterday, and maybe days prior as well. I think that we'll kind of walk through that proposal maybe after we get done the modeling here, if that's all right, Glenn, just so that I'm seeing Mark's head nod. So we'll get to that one shortly.
For sure, thanks.
Shannon,
Oh, sorry, Derek.
that's okay, Leah. Shannon, I see a hand raised. Is that still a residual one, or did you have a question on the modeling?
No, that's, I do have a hand raised there. Can you go back to your modeling chart, please?
Yes, of course. 1 second.
Okay, so my, of course, one of the most.
Was there a specific stock that?
Yeah, I want to look at this. You made a mention of Nooksack, Chinook. Now, as I look at these numbers here, specifically the South Fork, what's the story there? I see no rate of exploitation there. I mean,
So,
definitely those fish are going to be worked on in the ocean somewhere.
so Shannon, are you thinking specifically Nooksack Falls or Nooksack Springs?
No, I'm talking about springers.
Yep. For the Nooksack Springs, we have an exploitation rate ceiling of 10.9% in the SUS. In this set of model runs, you can see kind of what the results are coming out as. So currently, we're looking at 13.7% SUS. We have had kind of a few regional meetings with us and the tribes, some of our regional staff up here to start thinking about those Nooksack numbers.
Yeah, okay, so are you saying that the South Fork, the ceiling is 10% on the South Fork because you have no number there?
Oh, I see. We manage Nooksack as kind of an aggregate stock, both North and South Fork combined. They have kind of the same tag representation in the modeling. They have the same exploitation rates. So we manage those, at least when we're looking at exploitation rates in terms of an aggregate. We do have kind of separate abundance metrics that we're looking at for escapement, and that's what you're looking at in rows 5 and 6 here. So if you look specifically at this escapement column, you can see how the North Fork and South Fork are breaking out in terms of that escapement. But when we're looking at the exploitation rates, it's both combined. There isn't a separate metric for North and South.
Can I jump in on this one, Derek? So Shannon, I had a hallway conversation with Lummi tribal representatives last night. I think there's a plan for the co-managers to get down below the 10.9% with fishery shaping. So I don't expect that to be an issue as we step forward.
Yeah, okay, because it, just another one of the Chinook stocks that are a factor in all the fisheries. And just for the rest of the audience here, you should know that the Bellingham Bay gillnet fishermen do not fish on that stock. We haven't fished on that stock in over 35 years. So our fishery is mainly a fall fishery. So we got nothing to do with taking those fish out of the water. So the touchy point, of course, is the Stillaguamish. Stillaguamish itself as a system has had nothing but problems for 40 years. So, and I've been fishing for 50. So, that's a touchy spot there. Okay, thanks.
And if I could, Shannon, just to kind of wrap that one up, in 7BCD net, Bellingham Bay, we don't see a ton of Nooksack spring impacts. Very, very low.
Thank you.
And that looks like our last hand for right now, Derek.
Well, thanks for that so much, Leah. I might want to see if, as we're kind of finishing up looking at this modeling exercise, if we wanted to maybe pass to Mark to kind of go over some of what we're considering proposing for Puget Sound sport fisheries.
So folks may know we talked through it yesterday about what our proposed changes were going to be. We did post them on our website. So if folks haven't had a chance to look at it, the latest, greatest sport fishing proposals are up on the website for folks to comment. We also basically produced a document, sent it to our advisory group about kind of what those proposed changes are versus the initial modeling proposal versus this updated proposal. So I'll just step through and describe it really briefly. We proposed a July 14th opener in Area 7 with a 3-day-a-week season, essentially running that season until we're out of Chinook to harvest. And then we will close that fishery and reopen on August 15th for a coho opportunity, Chinook non-retention, to run through September 30th. The other coinciding move we proposed was a July 14th opener in Area 9. Again, 3-day seasons through the month of July, and I believe that one would, as long as there's quota available, would open for continuous through the end of September on July 28th. The other proposed change, we closed the Area 7 winter opportunity. And we also proposed an additional month of fishing in October in Area 8-1. Did I miss anything, Kirsten?
Area 10 would include March as well as February for the winter.
Thank you. Yes, we did return the February and March winter fishery in Area 10. So that's the current modeling proposal on the table from our perspective. And what Derek's looked at in the modeling is that that meets our target for our half of the total unmarked mortality on Stillaguamish. And We had some discussion with our co-managers last night about it. They hadn't really had a chance to, we hadn't modeled that. So the modeling of those results took place last night, and we're going to get together and look at that together this morning about the effects of those changes. So any questions about that?
Looks like we have a hand up from Zachary. Zach, you can unmute yourself.
Hi guys, appreciate it. So that is sort of that scenario 1 under that alternative proposed scenarios document, right? That you're talking about there.
I looked at a lot of documents, but I'll say yes. I saw Derek nodding his head. So
Yes. Okay. So when you say sort of that there hasn't been the modeling done, so that what is reflected on that document posted that's alternative proposed scenarios is sort of just like, I mean, it's not quick and dirty napkin math, but by the same token, that's sort of what it represents in terms of like extrapolating what we know rather than doing a full model run with those new inputs.
That's approximately accurate, Zachary. I would say that there's going to be some small changes to some of the quotas in there, likely from that scenario document. That scenario those scenarios were prepared with kind of a few model runs back. There's been changes to the ocean. There's been changes otherwise that could cause some of those quotas to fluctuate a little bit, but it should generally be close to that scenario 1 that we had proposed.
Okay, so that makes sense. So looking at that scenario, we end up with 63 total mortalities. And obviously, those end up being split 50-50, or that's sort of the target, is always split those 50-50. And if our co-managers end up sort of wanting to go with fishery that increases their mortalities by a couple over that, do we have any options to sort of end up matching that, or do we end up sort of being caught with the unmarked encounters? Like in terms of if it's at 63 and we can go up to 66, do we have options to go there, or is that sort of there's nothing that can be added on top of that?
You want me to answer that? So what I would say to that, Zachary, is that this is always a moving, a fluid conversation as we move through this process. The Stillaguamish tribe has expressed to us pretty consistently from the beginning of this process that their intention as we were shaping fisheries was to split those unmarked mortalities on the Stillaguamish stock as we have in the recent past with an even sharing of those impacts. So that's how we've been shaping our fisheries package with that, kind of general common understanding. We've had multiple check-ins with the Stillaguamish tribes since we started those conversations early. So the scenario you point out is a possibility, but I would not consider it a probability at this point.
Right.
I think we're all of kind of one collective mind that we know where we need to be, and we just need to put the fisheries on paper to get us there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just figured I'd, just wanted to sort of, make sure, and that it seems sort of, I'm not opposed to having that, 63 versus, I know earlier you're looking at like 70, at the end of the day. As much as I want to be on the water, it is also important to protect these stocks and, give us the best chance going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Zachary.
And our next hand is from Pat. Pat, you can unmute.
Thank you. I think it would be a couple of questions and 2 questions. The first one goes back to Glenn's question about quotas. It would be helpful when you have it, when this modeling isn't is more complete, I guess. Derek, I didn't quite know what you meant by was this fishery proposal for non-treaty fisheries run as a model run, not an official one with the tribes, but just run? And if it is, then what are the quotas for each of the areas? What are, and probably the most useful is the catch and the incident, the handle from the Mark Selective Fishery Report. That's a really good table. I think people could get a lot out of that and see their own potential constraints in terms of either the encounters of the various categories and the catch. So when you get around to that, that'd be great. The other is, Mark, back to you on the, you said that the objective has always been with the Stillaguamish tribe to split 50% the unmarked mortalities. I'm not sure if that's what you meant. Was it the total mortalities or was it just the unmarked mortalities? Because we've only been talking about the number of, we've had the numbers ranging from mid 60s to low 70s, and those were the combined. So could you clarify that, Mark, please? Thanks.
Yep, you caught me, Pat. I misspoke. You are correct. It's the total mortalities. So thank you. And I think Derek's going to walk through some of your questions about the modeling.
Yeah, I'm just pulling together one of those reports, those handy dandy kind of marks like the fishing reports that I have right now, Pat. It should be just a moment. And I'm gonna, as I'm walking through that, of course, this is all very super preliminary. This is all unofficial modeling that I've done kind of just on the side. So it's definitely subject to change once we get into something that's a little bit more official. But kind of here's what I'm seeing, this set of runs produces 64 mortalities for the non-treaty side. So that's kind of what this is targeting right here. But we're looking at in Area 7 summer quota, that's approximately 1,800. The Area 5 quotas, both for summer and winter, are unchanged. You can see what those are here, both in terms of landings and in terms of total encounters. Moving down to Area 9, we have Area 9 summer set to 4,700, which is, as folks might remember, that's kind of the same quota from last year. Area 6 right there, Area 10. One that might be of particular interest, particularly if Carl's on the line. I know he's asked about to view this one in the past. This is kind of where we're coming out in the modeling for Area 10. Area 11 is unchanged in all time periods. Area 12 and 13 are also unchanged across all time periods. So as we're looking at this set of modeling runs, Area 10 in the winter saw kind of a change to the quota and increase, whereas marine areas 7 and 9 saw a decrease in the summer period. Once again, all this is super preliminary, so when we have a modeling package, it might look slightly different in terms of quotas, but it's an approximation here.
Thank you, Pat. And our next hand is from Glenn. Glenn, you can unmute.
I have a question in regards to marked and unmarked on the Stilly. I misspoke. I think you misspoke when you said we share the marked, or excuse me, the unmarked 50-50 and the marked 50-50, but how do they fish unmarked? I mean, it sounds to me like they get 100% of the marked or unmarked, and we get 50% of the unmarked, or excuse me, 50% of the marked. Because they don't fish just for marked fish, do they?
So Glenn, Pat identified it and I misspoke. I said that we share the 50% of the total mortality. That has been kind of our what we've been targeting at for fisheries shaping. So obviously we know that our fisheries impact both the marked and unmarked stocks at different rates. They do catch hatchery fish in their catch as well, although it's at a much lower proportion. There is that hatchery stock that returns, the conservation program that returns to the Stillaguamish. So yeah, that's the clarification. As I misspoke, it's the total mortality that we're sharing. And yeah, you're right. We probably won't go all the way up to our total exploitation rates on the marked stock this year, just because of the way it works out for the fishery shaping and how those exploitation rates work themselves out through the season setting and modeling. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you, Glenn. Our next hand is from Carl. Carl, you can unmute.
Thank you, Leah. You know, part of this I know the answer to, you know, part I don't, I should, but my question with regards to marked and unmarked Stillaguamish, while we're on that topic, both for this year and for the 10-year agreement going forward, is there any ESA reason to manage for the unmarked Stillaguamish? And or is this, you know, goal sort of an agreed to, you know, good faith target based on you know, tribal agreements in order to try to recover their fishery? And the second part of the question is, there, you know, is there any legal requirement to I mean, obviously we're going to try to manage on good faith with the co-managers, but I'm just curious if there's a legal requirement to meet that objective, you know, when you compare it to an unmarked fish, where I believe we have a legal obligation to meet that objective.
So Carl, are you asking if we have a legal obligation to manage for the hatchery stock on the Stillaguamish?
Yeah, in so many words.
Well, I don't think that it matters whether or not we're talking about the hatchery or the natural stock on the Stillaguamish. We have a set of agreed to management objectives that we've submitted to NOAA Fisheries about how we're going to manage and what rates we're going to keep as ceilings for that management. And I think that is all inclusive of both hatchery and natural stocks.
Thanks. Let me ask you this in a different way. If you were to submit a package that did not meet the objective of marked fish, say, you know, the tribes agreed with you in a future year to have a package that did not meet that objective, would the feds have a problem with that? Would the council have any problem with that?
You know, I can't speak for the feds, Carl, about how they would react to us proposing a fishing package that did not meet the management objectives that we told them that we were going to manage to. So I imagine it probably wouldn't be met favorably, but again, I can't speak for James or Susan or others that NOAA about how they would evaluate that. I mean, again, we set these objectives as conservation targets for and how we're supposed to manage these fisheries, and that's, you know, that's the deal here. That's we agree to these objectives, and that's we shape our fisheries to get to those objectives.
Well, you know, it's probably pointless for today, but it's just a you know, kind of a theoretical argument for the future. Is that I would expect it to be met with a different reaction than if you were going over on an ESA listed stock. That's all. That's my comment. But thank you for your time.
Thanks, Carl. And it looks like that was our last hand for right now. So just to remind folks on the phone, *9 to raise your hand. And if you're on a computer or a phone, you might need to click the reactions tab, which is the smiley face at the bottom of your screen. And it looks like Zachary has his hand back up.
Hey guys, so obviously stuff is fluid and will change. We do these you know, more model runs and crafting going forward with new ocean inputs. But which seasons and specifically which quotas are established right now in terms of like they're designed to last the full time period versus which quotas are in place that are less than our, you know, our models predict it would take to last the full time?
Hey, Zachary. So that's a great question. Maybe I'll take that one. I think that for Area 5, both summer and winter, those ones are designed to be kind of for a full season model, as well as area. Let's just say basically every area currently in the modeling, with the exception of Area 7 sport and Area 9 sport, are two that are the ones that we've kind of modeled, expecting to make it through the season.
Okay, and so that sort of, I mean, and the goal with sort of like the days per week, that it's 7 to 9 potentially, is to make that last for the longer time period that we're hoping for. So then, just sort of to help me sort of get a frame for reference, like this past year with Area 10 winter, 3-month season, was that quota modeled to be a full 3-month season, or was that quota reduced from what we thought would take a full season? Just to sort of, you know, obviously this stuff is so variable and it depends on so many different factors, you know, conditions and whatnot, but just to like, that was a quota that I think most of us looked at and were like, well, this is not going to last 3 days. They're not going to last 3 months. And we then made those in-season adjustments. And just, was that sort of for reference, was that spit out by the model as a full season or not?
It was one that was spit out as a full season for last year. Area 10 in the winter is a little bit of an interesting fishery compared to a lot of our other fisheries. That's one of the ones where we see a whole lot of variability in our sublegal legal ratios, as well as kind of some of our other metrics that we have that makes predicting total encounters maybe a little bit more variable than it is for some other areas. Now, not saying that we didn't have issues in other areas. We definitely, many of our summer fisheries closed early last year. It's something that we've kind of seen, but to answer your question shortly, yes, Area 10 was one that we'd modeled last year, expecting to make it through a full season.
Yeah, and I know it is, you know, really complicated because often, you know, sort of you never want to, or not necessarily you never want to, but, you know, people are going to be hesitant to model with sort of additional fudge factor for lack of you know, better phrasing, to like, you know, I know different fisheries have different, you know, for instance, I know the ocean, it's really important to them to have a fishery that will not end, you know, prematurely. Whereas I think that, you know, most people Puget Sound are a little bit more willing to sort of, you know, plan on opening more, and just, you know, that way we have that laid out. And obviously if one area closes, then you're going to have an effort shift, and that tends to sort of, you know, go down sort of like dominoes. But what sort of, I know you said, is it 5 of the last 7 seasons it would last that long? And what is sort of is the metric that you use in terms of like building in the ranges of CPUE and effort? I don't know if that makes much sense, but if you sort of see where I'm trying to go with that, you know.
We use so you were correct, but it's 6 out of the last 10 years is what we look at, and we look at it specifically in terms of quota as we're doing that modeling.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
And it looks like our next hand is from Art. Art, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah. We can.
Oh, okay. Didn't see any reaction there. That last run Puget Sound fisheries are proposed, and I know it's, preliminary. Is there a way to access that? Or is it online, or are you gonna wait till things are a little more finalized?
So the actual like written proposal of what changed from the kind of the initial sport fishing package that we put out in mid-March, the modified proposal is online for folks to view. We don't have any of the modeling results up online because it wasn't the modeling that we did as part of those proposals wasn't part of the package that went through the council process yesterday. It was more just a kind of a side model run for the co-managers to look at some of the fisheries effects. So the plan would be, Art, that there's a council action item today that essentially allows the co-managers to insert their inside fisheries combined with the STT or the council package. So we're hopeful that we can have some conversation with the co-managers today and put some co-manager inputs into that next guidance to the council and the STT. We are, according to the calendar, final action is supposed to take place tomorrow on salmon season. So it's really imperative that the co-managers make some progress throughout the day today on that final fishing package to try to get us to that finish line tomorrow. We do have a little bit of time built into Wednesday morning if needed, if we need to push it that far, but I do believe that the state and the tribes are really working hard to try to get us to that tomorrow afternoon final gavel on salmon.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Art. And our next hand is from Shannon. Shannon, you can unmute.
Yeah, thank you. I got two questions. One is about that Klamath River Chinook stock. Yesterday, there was a mention of it. Some concerns. Did you guys work that out in your ocean fishery? And then the other question I have is probably for Mark. Dealing with our chum fishery, you said you were going to have discussions with the tribes about our chum fishery 10 and 11. And what I'm hearing from my end is we'd like to see if we do have a trigger number that allows for a fishery. What I'm hearing from Seattle, Tacoma, and Bellingham here is we'd like to go back to that November 10th drop dead date for ending the fishery. So what do you know, Mark?
Well, we've had a bunch of discussions about chum, Shannon. A lot of it is focused on our expanded monitoring and evaluation efforts of chum fisheries. The legislature and the governor's office gave us some funding through the legislative packages to increase our efforts in the monitoring and evaluation of those commercial fisheries. So what I can say is, Shannon, the outlook for this year's fisheries isn't much brighter than last year. I don't know that we're going to be planning very many opportunities pre-season. I think it's going to be another one of those cases where we're going to look at our in-season tools and evaluate whether or not it makes sense to put fisheries on the water. You know, Shannon, that we've had really declining productivity in the recent number of years around those natural stocks, especially for South Sound. We missed our brood stocking escapement goals on the canal for a number of years. We did better last year, but then we also lost some fish last fall as well. So, you know, we continue to struggle a little bit trying to get these chum stocks to return. And I think it's just going to be another conservative year about chum fisheries this year.
Yeah, okay, so just my return comment on it. Yeah, I did hear about the 30,000 eggs that were lost at, I believe it was McKernan. But you know, if we do hit our trigger number to prosecute a fishery, I guess what I'm saying is that to get the state share, because it is the state share, we really need to be looking at that November 10th, and it seems to be the issue with the issues with the Nisquallies. And so anyway, I had to mention it because that's what I'm hearing.
And thanks, Dr. Mikiaga's in the room. He's our lead around those fisheries and species evaluations. Mickey just reminded me that that's part of our monitoring and evaluation proposal, Shannon, is actually conducting a test fishery later on through the fall to be able to evaluate the impacts of and timing of those late run fish. You know, because you've been in the game for a long time, that Apple Cove fishery ends about week 46, and we don't do any evaluation later on in the season. So the co-managers have agreed to extend that evaluation test fishery for another 3 to 4 weeks, I think, into the fall to try to figure out the impacts of that late timing run. So when the expectation is that these stocks do rebound and we have the ability to fish that late, that we know what our impacts on that late run will be.
Well, I guess that's good news. Sounds like some cooperative movement. More science is better, you know, and from my end, the fishermen have to be eternal optimists, and I'm here to say right now, I think the run's going to be better. Ocean conditions are in a neutral position, maybe on an upward swing. So I think we're gonna have some pretty good runs in the fall, and I'll leave it at that. Other than the question of the Klamath, did we ever figure out a solution on that ocean interception there on that Klamath stock?
So, yeah, I mean, we were able to get the expected modeling and planning to meet those rates that NOAA and the managers were looking for south of Falcon. So we were able to do that. I think there is some work to do on the modeling and evaluation side. That's going to be, part of that ongoing discussion. As you know, the managers and people like Derek work to kind of integrate and improve those planning models. Specifically, the FRAM model that we use on the coast, and they use a separate model for that Klamath stock in Southern Oregon and Northern California. So there's some work to do, but I think for this year, we've got it covered.
Yeah, all right, well, that's good. BLM has got to stop taking so much water off the upper watershed if that stock is to survive in the future. So a lot of illegal irrigation going on in that upper watershed. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Shannon.
And our next hand is from Pat.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to compliment the eternal optimist, Shannon. I enjoy listening to you, Shannon, and especially like that your what you said there, something like I had to mention it. That's why I'm here. That everybody ought to take note of that. These Zoom meetings are tough because we're not all sitting together and having more collegial conversations and discussions, and you ought to not be shy to speak up, and I'm not going to be, or haven't been. Now to my points. I think Zachary might have already asked for it, but please provide that mark selective fishery report table when you have it in a form that you think is more accurate there, Derek, and thank you for that. So we can look at those quotas a little bit more slowly and see how things have changed by area. I have kind of a statement here, and it's related to some of the information that I have been looking at with the Stillaguamish, and I really I think, Mark, you provided a good response to the questions about the objectives for the hatchery stock. There's a vast difference between ESA bottom lines and state and tribal agreements. They're not the same thing. So the state and the tribes have agreed to limit the hatchery fish, and it's not an ESA issue, I don't think, but it is a state tribal, a USV Washington issue, and if they agree to that, well, then they're in a way legally obliged because they have the requirement to reach agreement on objectives. But it is really true that the Stillaguamish hatchery stock is the most constraining stock. It's more constraining for the non-treaty fisheries than it is for the tribal fisheries, simply because we've been conducting our fisheries as mark selective. That means that we run out of hatchery fish faster than we run out of wild fish impacts. If we split them 50-50, each one of those stocks, we could catch more fish. But that's why I would like to see the details on how those are split. And the reason, there may be a complicated reason for this. I'm just laying this out there, just sort of for the record, and Derek and I have talked about this, and I think that there is a modeling problem, Derek, despite our back and forth and discussions about this. I think there is a problem with FRAM in how areas 6, 7, and 11 are modeled for mark selective fisheries on Stillaguamish. Despite your good review of that. I'd respectfully request that after this year is over, there's no way to change it now, but I don't think it makes sense. I think there's a flaw in the hatchery representation, that hatchery stock representation. Its abundance for those 3 areas alone are like 4 times the hatchery impact compared to the wild stock or unmarked stock impact. And the only way that I can think that that is possible is if the modeling of hatchery fish that is different than the modeling of unmarked fish. And that's not supposed to be the case. They're supposed to have the same tag data. I believe that the hatchery stock and the wild stock, the marked and unmarked stocks, are identically represented by the in terms of coded wire tag data. It very well could be the sublegal proportion is flawed, and that's the only way I can think of how the abundance can change and the impacts then can be elevated so dramatically for hatchery stocks or the hatchery Stiligwamish stock compared to the unmarked stock. And that's flawed because I don't see that it is changed, the abundance has changed even in the wintertime for the other fisheries. It would change uniformly. And so I think that needs a look at. I think you're going to find a problem there when you get the time to really dive into it with your team. So this is sort of a challenge for you to take a look at that after North of Falcon is over. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Pat. We'll take a look at that one after North of Falcon, and I'd really love to circle back up with you in email on that one when we get the opportunity to do so.
And it looks like our next hand is from Glenn. Glenn, you can unmute.
Hey, Mark, you mentioned that there's going to be an increased test fisheries in different areas. Is this part of the agreed fisheries with the co-managers, or just a management objective just from the department?
Well, I would say that our sampling and monitoring programs for these fisheries includes test fishing. We've implemented that since 2003 in a lot of areas. Well, over time, we were able to back that off and try to move resources around as our resources stayed stagnant, and we were opening up more and more marine areas for mark selective opportunities. We had a smallish fleet of kind of smaller size North River boats that we were able to secure in the early parts of expanding mark selective opportunities on Chinook. We haven't replaced any of that fleet since the early 2000s, and so it's a aging aluminum boat fleet that we really needed to kind of kick back into gear. I think there were concerns as we've seen a lot of this data and relied on some of the dockside and voluntary trip report information. We have seen some significant shifts from the general public in not participating in those programs. So it's really important for us to make sure that we have that fishery independent data available to us for the evaluation of these fisheries. So it is somewhat of an expansion from the past, but it's really just staying true to those estimation schemes that we have for these fisheries in season, and staying to the best parts of that sample design, which do include a test fishery.
So basically, it's part of the agreed fisheries, but the way it's conducted is up to the department, correct?
Well, and like I said, we can agree as to which estimation we're using by marine area. So for instance, this summer, we're going to be implementing a test fishery in Marine Area 5, but we'll be using the different methodology in Marine Area 6, where we don't have a test boat available to us this year. We will next year, but for this year, we're still running with our old fleet. We actually use some of our commercial monitoring boats during the recreational fisheries to help out where we can. But that's kind of the goal going forward. Also, just thinking about, we've added staffing and time on the water. I think we've noticed over time here that fishing outside of the kind of fishery time periods has provided us some really valuable data around kind of size and age structure within those time periods. I know Ty Garber, our mark selective fisheries biologist, has done a lot of analysis on the test fishing data. And also Dr. Simonson has started a gear study over the last year with our test fishing boats that we're really excited to expand to a much larger area throughout Puget Sound as we expand those test fishing opportunities. So lots of good reasons to include test fishing and expand it as we can.
In which I agree. I guess what I'm getting at as I think about the test fisheries is how the test fisheries are going to be conducted. I mean, they're supposed to represent all the types of fishing going out there using the different gear, whether they're mooching, whether they're motor mooching, whether they're trolling with just weights, whether they're using flashers or not, whether they're using downriggers or not. I mean, there's 24 different ways to catch fish, and not everybody fishes the same. So I just, as I think about this, you guys are doing these test fisheries. I'm hoping that the test fisheries is using all the different methods of fishing and not just one method, out there with a piece of bait and catching all these shakers and not really getting a true sense of how everybody fishes.
May I speak to that one, Mark?
If you want to.
Yeah, so thanks for that. And we are taking that into account, and we're actually about to, so we've spent a lot of time talking to folks in the industry, talking to people that are out there fishing, and making sure that we are kind of dividing up that effort and the gear types among the test fisheries. We're actually about to launch another survey that we're going to undertake to kind of get a better idea more comprehensively throughout the Puget Sound on what types of gear and what types of techniques folks are using. We've also started a pilot charter observer program where we're actually doing ride-alongs with some charter boats. And so we're actually out there being able to observe kind of what they're doing, methodologies, and that includes both trolling boats and also mooching boats and a couple other folks as well. So we are taking into account all of those things that are happening, all the differential methodologies for fishing. We understand that it's different in different areas as well. And so we try to take that information into consideration when we plan test fisheries in different areas. So we know there's some specific things. I'm thinking like Area 11 has some specific techniques that are used. The test fishers do implement that down there. We know like Area 7 has some different ways of going about things, and we are implementing that for the test fishery there as well. So we are taking that information to account, and that is being included when we plan test fisheries.
And Mark, I got one other question about the stilly marked fish. If we're only fishing to, I thought it was 14% of the run for the is that caught or is that mortalities? And what happens to the uncaught hatchery fish? Are those going into the system and spawning and later being counted as unmarked? Because it's obvious that we're all getting shut down. The tribes, co-manage, everybody, based on this marked fishery, and we're not catching 100% of the marked fish.
So let's be real clear here. The fishery limitations that we have in place are not around the marked fish. We don't have enough unmarked fish to be able to get at all the marked fish. So, and Derek, please correct me if I'm wrong, if I say something incorrect, but as we're looking at the modeling and that exploitation rate limit, I don't think we're going to come close to the 14% this year. So it's not the marked fish that are the limiter here. Let's remember, everybody, that this marked program is a conservation hatchery program. It's an integrated program. It's one where we use the wild fish as part of that program. And the reason we mark those fish is because we know that in northern fisheries that occur in Alaska and West Coast Vancouver Island and BC, that they don't have the same sampling and monitoring programs that we do here. We do very robust programs between the co-managers. So in those northern fisheries, they're not sampling unmarked fish for coded wire tags. So, we need that information to be able to evaluate the fisheries effects on these stocks.
Thanks.
And it looks like our next hand is from Carl. Carl, you can unmute.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Yeah, I was just taking notice of something. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but usually by this point in the process, where we go in and we have a set of proposed fisheries modifications or whatever, and we take them to the tribes and we feel like they're pretty reasonable and they're meeting objectives, and we get, come back with, well, we need to talk about this because our co-managers don't like this fishery and they want us to do this or that, and we have to continue shaping. So far, I'm not hearing that message. I mean, I know that since you posted stuff on the website, I feel like you've shared it with the tribes, and perhaps it's because our our proposals are more reasonable this year than other years or whatever. I'm not hearing the pushback yet. That's not to say it doesn't exist, but I mean, how are things going? You don't have these red flags on the ocular effect or anything on any of the fisheries in Puget Sound yet, or where are we at on that?
Well, Carl, I think it's pretty obvious that the tribes have yet to make significant changes to the initial round of co-manager model runs to help get us to meeting those management objectives. I can't speak as to what's going on in the tribal room and why they haven't laid fisheries proposals on the table to try to get us there, but that's the reality of the situation. Is the co-managers have made no kind of inside moves to try to get us there. We're continuing to have discussions, but we don't get to dictate when they put their fisheries in for modeling. So we continue to have those discussions around what the seasons would be. We talked about, the fisheries proposals last night. And I'll be quite honest with everybody, the biggest pushback that we got on the fisheries proposals was adding October and 8/1. So, I didn't hear a whole lot of big pushback with what we proposed for summer seasons. The biggest pushback, to be honest, is there's a whole lot of concern that even with 3 days open in Area 7, that we're going to go over that impact in just 3 days for Chinook. So, the tribes pay attention to our fisheries just as much as we pay attention to our fisheries. They've seen the increases in effort and CPUE, and that's a concern, that, they want to ensure, they want some confidence, I guess, from the tribal side that we're going to be responsible and try to stay within our expected impacts in these fisheries. So they have expressed that concern, but I didn't hear any big pushback about what was put on the table last night.
Yeah, it's getting later and later every year to where you're going to get, it really literally comes down to a matter of hours that you have to do the final shaping and negotiations because people aren't plugging in realistic fisheries. But thank you for your reply, Mark.
Thanks, Carl. And our next hand is from Shannon. Shannon, you can unmute.
Yeah, so I guess this question's for Mark or any of the staff that are in the background there on the commercial side. So there was discussion on this survey to send out to the permit holders. So I got into my address book and I notified many people as I could that's in my address book on this. So now the comment I have is you need to know that a lot of the Washington fishermen are going to be headed to Bristol Bay probably the middle of May, Prince William Sound the 1st of May, and Southeast Alaska district by the middle of July. So the sooner you get that out, the better off you are for getting the information that you need. So just as soon as you can on that. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that, Shannon. And I just got a hail across the room that it should be in the mail today.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you.
And that looks like our last hand.
Well, thanks again for being here this morning, everybody. Really appreciate everybody's time. So we did, Kirsten reached out to the advisory group yesterday, so we've got a blast for there. If anything changes through the day, we'll try to pull people back together. Otherwise, when we do co-manager modeling results, we'll get those posted up on the website. And stay tuned, and thanks for being here, and we'll check back with you tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.